Hello, everybody. Today I want to go over a story by Leo Tolstoy, the famous Russian author, to illustrate how literature, great literature, contains within it an element of reality. That is, the author, when he writes a story or a poem or an essay, is not entirely dependent on fiction. That is, a great work of art is not entirely made up of fictional material, imaginary material, but it is based on reality. So, with respect to the situation which was there about a few years ago, that is the COVID pandemic, uh, this story by Leo Tolstoy called Two Deer may be relevant. Okay, so we'll see how that is. So we'll read the story. Two Deer by Leo Tolstoy. Right? Near the borders of France and Italy, on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, lies a tiny little kingdom called Monaco. Now, it's a real kingdom. Monaco is a real kingdom. It is a tiny little kingdom, and it's on the borders of the countries of France and Italy and the Mediterranean. Right? It's a tiny kingdom. How tiny is it? We're told many a small country town can boast more inhabitants than this kingdom, for there are only about 7,000 of them all told. And if all the land in the kingdom were divided, there would not be an acre for each inhabitant. So, how tiny is it? The author describes it. He compares the kingdom of Monaco to a small country town. Now, to get an idea of a country town, what we can imagine is a town like Tiptur or Arsikere, like that, right? So all these small country towns, they can boast more inhabitants than this kingdom. Inhabitants are people who inhabit or live in a place. So a small country town has more has a greater population than Monaco, because there are only 7,000 citizens of Monaco. 7,000 people is not a large number. Okay, so 7,000 people in the entire country, that is a population of Monaco. And if all the land in the kingdom were divided, there would not be an acre for each inhabitant. So, what about the size of the country? What is the land area of the country? If all the land in the kingdom were to be divided among the 7,000 inhabitants, there would not be an acre. So, it's less than 7,000 acres, right? So 700 acres is about the size of a small ward, as they call it in Bangalore. A ward is not like Vijayanagar or Jayanagar. This, it contains 7,000 acres, and but in these 7,000 acres, only 7,000 people lived. Hmm? But in this toy kingdom, there is a real kinglet, and he has a palace and courtiers and ministers and a bishop and generals and an army. So, in this toy kingdom, Monaco is called a toy kingdom, a small kingdom. In this toy kingdom, there is a real kinglet. A kinglet is a minor king, and this kinglet has a palace, just as all kings have palaces. The king of Monaco also has a palace, and in the palace, you find the courtiers. Courtiers are the people who work for the king, right? And ministers, and a bishop. A bishop is the head of the church, and he also has generals and an army. So it's a self-contained sort of kingdom, right? Everything that makes up a larger country is found in Monaco. So it says it is not a large army, only 60 men in all, but still it is an army. So in the army there were only 60 soldiers. There were also taxes in this kingdom, as elsewhere, a tax on tobacco and on wine and spirits, and a poll tax. Taxes are the way in which a government functions, right? So that people are taxed the money from the taxes is used to build infrastructure. The government makes all sorts of, uh, you know, uh, improvements in the infrastructure. They build roads, they build bridges. They build the metro, for example, in a country across the length and breadth of the country, and they do so many things which for the good of the civilian population. All that is based on taxes. But where the taxes come from in Monaco, they come from wine and spirits and tobacco and the poll tax, right? Tobacco and wine and spirits are alcohol, right? So you see, these things are used by the majority of people, right? These things are used by the majority of people. Hardly anyone, will buy something like, you know, let's say sofa, or let's say anything else that's sold in the shops. They won't generate as much tax as the, stimulants, alcohol, spirits, and tobacco, right? So, but though the people there drink and smoke as people do in other countries, there are so few of them that the king would have been hard put to it to feed his courtiers and officials, and to keep himself, he had not found a new and special source of revenue, right? So, you see, uh, now, um, the king would have been hard put to it. He would have found it difficult to feed his courtiers and officials and himself. He would have found it difficult to pay the money for a salary for all his you know servants, right? If he had not found a new and special source of revenue. So taxes generated from 7,000 people is hardly enough. So there was a new and special source of revenue. This special revenue comes from a gaming house where people play roulette, right? Roulette is a gambling game. A gaming house, actually a casino, right? In Monaco, you find many casinos. So you see, what can we infer from this information? You see, when the COVID pandemic happened in our state, right? What did the government do? It first opened the wine shops, right? The first thing it did was open the wine shops. The treasury was exhausted. There was no income to the treasury. So once they opened the wine shops, what happened? The treasury started to function again, right? So the next source of revenue, this special revenue, comes from a casino where people play roulette. In Monaco, they actually have, it's built on this casino. Everywhere you find casinos in Monaco. People play, and whether they win or lose, the keeper always gets a percentage on the turnover. And out of his profits, he pays a large sum to the king. Right? So people gamble. They go to the casinos to gamble. Whether they win or lose, right? The owner of the casino gets a percentage of the turnover, right? Whether the people win a game or lose a game, the keeper always gets a percentage of the turnover. And out of his profits, he pays a large sum to the king. So a large percentage of his income, the casino owner's income, is paid to the king. So that's how the king maintains his kingdom. The reason he pays so much is that it is the only such gambling establishment left in Europe. So in the whole of Europe, in Europe means the countries of France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Greece, right? And Iceland, Finland. In the whole of Europe, in Monaco, there was the only casino left, right? Some of the little German sovereigns used to keep gaming houses of the same kind, but some years ago they were forbidden to do so. The reason they were stopped was because these gaming houses did so much harm. A man would come and try his luck, then he would risk all he had and lose it. Then he would risk even money that did not belong to him and lose that too, and then in despair he would drown or shoot himself. So we're told that some of the little German sovereigns, see, Germany was not a unified country when the story was written. Germany was made up of individual provinces. Each of these provinces had a ruler. So some of these little German sovereigns, some of these little German kings, they kept gaming houses of the same kind. But they were forbidden to do so by the people because they did so much harm, right? Somebody would come in to try his luck in the casino, right? He would risk all the money that he had, and then he would, of course, lose the money. Then he would borrow some money to try his luck again, and he would lose that too. And when the creditors came for him, in despair, he would feel loss of hope. He would drown or shoot himself. Take a gun, point it at his throat and pull the trigger, or it tie a stone around his legs and jump into the lake, right? So he would drown or shoot himself. So this is the harm that gambling does, right? Many people committed suicide. So all the people got together and forbade the little German sovereigns to keep casinos, right? But no, so the Germans forbade their rulers to make money in this way. But there was no one to stop the King of Monaco, and he remained with a monopoly of the business. So eventually, what happened? There were no casinos left in Europe, but there was no one to stop the King of Monaco. So he had the only such casino in the whole of Europe, right? He had a monopoly of the business. So now everyone who wants to gamble goes to Monaco, right? Whether they win or lose, the king gains by it. So in the whole of Europe, people went to Monaco to gamble. Whether the people won a game or lost a game, the king of Monaco would profit from that, from their playing. So what do we learn from this? You can't earn stone palaces by honest labor, as the proverb says, right? The proverb written in one of the scriptures says you can't earn stone palaces by honest labor, right? So honest labor, a palace built on such magnificent scale, such grand architecture, such a great deal of labor, such a great deal of effort, and the maintenance itself is somewhat colossal, right? So you can't build stone palaces by honest labor. Honest labor is what people do. They go to the office at 9, come back at 5. So it's not possible to build a palace by honest labor, right? As the proverb says, the king of Monaco could not keep his palace by honest labor. And the kinglet of Monaco knows it is a dirty business, but what is he to do? So the king of Monaco knows it's a dirty business. No, for people to drink and smoke and gamble, it's a dirty business. But what is he to do? If he somehow, out of scruples, moral scruples, says it's not good, I'll stop this, then he himself would be forced to starve. What is he to do? He has to live, and to draw revenue from drink and from tobacco is also not a nice thing. So he lives and drains and rakes in the money and holds his court with all the ceremony of a real king. So what does he do? He lives and drains, lives and rules, rakes in the money, right? So makes money by the ton, and he holds his court with all the ceremony of a real king. He has his coronation, his levees, he rewards sentences and pardons, and he also has his reviews, councils, laws, and courts of justice. Just like other kings, only all on a smaller scale. So he has his coronation. Coronation is a crowning ceremony. He rewards sentences and pardons. So he rewards people, he sentences wrongdoers, he pardons criminals, and he also has reviews, council, laws, and courts of justice, just like other kings, only all on a smaller scale, right? Now it happened a few years ago that a murder was committed in this toy king's domains. So now once what happened in Monaco was someone murdered someone else, right? The people of that kingdom are peaceable, and such a thing had not happened before. So the people of Monaco are peaceable, they naturally go about their business, routine stuff, from morning till evening, do something and go to sleep and repeat the okay. The people of the kingdom are peaceable, and such a thing as a murder had not happened before. The judges assembled with much ceremony and tried the case in the most judicial manner. So the judges assembled, right? The criminal was caught. He was brought to the trial. He was brought to trial. The judges assembled, with the wigs and the gowns, and they assembled with much ceremony and tried the case in the most judicial manner. The judicial manner is a manner or the method which is employed in a court of law, right? What is a method used in a court of law? Here, the judge listens to both the accuser and the defender, right? And maybe there is a jury. Jury is made up of 12 honest citizens, right? Who are law-abiding, known to have no records in any of the government departments, in any of the police stations in their name. They have no, and they are clean, they are honest, and 12 such citizens are chosen, and they also have to attend the sessions, and they have to listen to both the prosecutor and the defender arguing the case, and finally, either the judge or the jury delivers the verdict. The verdict is the judgment, whether guilty or not guilty, right? So this is the judicial manner. There were judges and prosecutors. Prosecutors are accusers. This is the accusing lawyer. And jurymen. There was also a jury and barristers. They argued and judged, and at last they condemned the criminal to have his head cut off as the law directs. So they argued and judged, right? One said he's guilty, the other said he's not guilty, right? This went on for a long time, right? And at last they condemned the criminal to have his head cut off as the law directs. So finally he was sentenced to be executed. He's found to be guilty and he has to have his head cut off. So far so good. Next they submitted the sentence to the king. The king read the sentence and confirmed it, right? So here we're told, now the decision of the court has to be submitted to the king. The king is the head of state, right? So even today, when there is such a decision, when there's such a verdict delivered, okay, when it's called, when a sentence for execution is made, is decided upon, the thing has to go to the president of the country, right? So they submitted the sentence to the king, who is the head of state. The king read the sentence and confirmed it. So he ratifies it, says, okay, if the fellow must be executed, execute him. So that's final, right? He was going to be executed. There was only one hitch in the matter, only one small problem in the matter, and that was that they had neither a guillotine for cutting heads off nor an executioner, right? The problem was they had no machine, a machine for severing heads from the body. That is called a guillotine. You can either look it up on the internet what a guillotine is, or you can imagine that you have two poles and they are very tall, long poles. They stretch straight upright, and at the edge of these poles there's a blade, slanted blade. It's very heavy and is held in place by a rope. The criminal puts his head at the bottom, okay? He places his neck at the bottom, his hands are tied, he's probably blindfolded, and the executioner, he's the one who lets go of the rope. When the blade descends, it cleanly severs the head from the body, and the head lands in what is called a bread basket. It's called a bread basket, right? So they had no such machine. They had no guillotine for cutting the head off, nor did they have an executioner. So now what happens? Now the sentence has to be carried out. So what do? The ministers considered the matter and decided to address an inquiry to the French government. So once such an issue comes up, the ministers have to decide. So they form a committee and they discuss this. Okay, and that's what governments actually do. When some problem comes up, they all get together, they all put their heads together, and now what have these ministers decided? they decided to address an inquiry to the French government, asking whether the French could not lend them a machine and an expert to cut off the criminal's head. So, and they wrote, they decided to petition the French government. The government of France is a neighboring government. So they decided to petition the French government asking whether the French could not lend them a guillotine and an expert, as an executioner, to cut off the criminal's head. Right? Why do they need an executioner? Because, if another person, if a layman or ordinary person would let go of the rope, perhaps he would just hold on to it long enough so that, the blade would not cleanly sever the head from the end. It would be hanging, right, from left hanging, it not fall into the bread basket. So they needed an expert. They needed an expert executioner and a guillotine. So if the French were to lend them these two, would they kindly inform them what the cost would? So it decided on the cost. The letter was sent. A week later, the reply came. A machine and an expert could be supplied, and the cost would be 16,000 francs. A franc is the currency of France. So a week later, the reply came back from France, and the French said, "We'll gladly supply a machine and a guillotine and an expert, but it would cost them 16,000 francs." Right? This was laid before the king. He thought it over. 16,000 francs. The wretch is not worth the money, said he. So 16,000 francs is something like 16 lakh rupees, right? Something like that. It could be more, right? So the king thought it over. 16,000 francs. The wretch is not worth the money. So how can I spend 16,000 francs on executing a single person, said he. Can't it be done somewhat cheaper? Somehow we could reduce the price. Why? 16,000 francs is more than 2 francs a head on the whole population. The people won't stand it and it may cause a riot. Why? So he thinks it over and says, 16,000, how is he to generate 16,000 francs? He has to get it from the taxes. So there are 7,000 people. Even if all the 7,000 pay 2 francs per head, per person, then it still won't make up 6. So slightly more than 2 francs. So if you increase the taxes too much, the people will riot. So he says to himself, if I were to tax the people for 2 francs a head per person, the people won't stand it, and then it may cause a riot. So people would riot. They run across the streets, looting the shops, setting things on fire, right? So the government, people won't stand it, right? So a council was called to consider what could be done, and it was decided to send a similar inquiry to the king of Italy, right? So again, they form a committee, they form a council, right? They meet to consider what could be done, and and finally they decided to send a similar inquiry to the king of Italy. So they decide to send a letter of request to the another neighboring kingdom, the king of Italy. The French government is republican and has no proper respect for kings. But the king of Italy was a brother monarch and might be induced to do the thing cheaper. So here what we're told is the French government is a republican government. Republic, the very word republic has the word public in it. So a government formed by the public, by the people, of the people, for the people. So the French government is a republic, right? It has no proper respect for kings. Kings are, they form a government called the aristocracy. It is hereditary right. This prince is the son of the king. He gets to rule the kingdom, and his son gets to rule the kingdom. That is an aristocracy, like we have, for example, in England, right? But the French government is republican, has no proper respect for kings. But the king of Italy was a brother monarch. Italy was ruled by a king. He was a brother monarch and might be induced to do the thing cheaper, right? So, as king to king, he might be made to reduce the price. So the letter was written and a prompt reply was received. So the letter was written to the king of Italy, and quickly a reply came back from the Italian king. The Italian government wrote that they would have pleasure in supplying both a machine and an expert, and the whole cost would be 12,000 francs, including traveling expenses. So, Italian government wrote, right? They would have pleasure in supplying both a machine and an expert, and the whole cost would be 12,000 francs, including the traveling expenses. The traveling expenses is the cost or the expense of transporting the guillotine, transporting the executioner. So it includes all this. This was cheaper, but still it seemed too much. So 12,000 francs still means around 1.85 francs tax on the whole population. Again, still it seemed too much. The rascal was really not worth the money. So 12,000 francs to execute one person, that's what the king thinks. It will still mean nearly 2 francs more per head on the taxes. Nearly 2 francs, right? About one. Another council was called. So again the ministers meet. Again the committee is formed. So now we get an idea of how the government functions. Some problem arises, a committee or a council is called, they put their heads together, decide, discuss, and come to a decision. If that doesn't work out, yet another meeting is called, right? So another council was called. They discussed and considered how it could be done with less expense. Could not one of the soldiers perhaps be got to do it in a rough and homely fashion? So finally, the ministers, they ponder the situation, right? They think it over and they discuss and they say, we have 60 soldiers in the army. You see, if you are one of the soldiers fight, right? Fight other people, and their job is to kill other people, right? So couldn't one of the soldiers be made to execute the criminal in a rough and homely fashion? Rough and homely fashion means he takes a bayonet. Bayonet is a rifle with a knife at the end of it. Takes a bayonet and stabs the criminal, right? In a rough and homely fashion. Couldn't it be done? That's what they ponder, right? So the general was called and was asked, can't you find us a soldier who would cut off the man's head? So the general of the army was called. Can you find us among the 60 soldiers? Can you find one who will cut the man's head off? In war, they don't mind killing people. That's what happens in a war, the general is told by the ministers. In war, they don't mind killing people. In fact, that is what they're trained for. So the whole training is to kill people. Soldiers' training is to kill people. So the general talked it over with the soldiers to see whether one of them would not undertake the job. So the general summoned the soldiers and he put the point before them. See, one of you should do this. You should execute the criminal. But none of the soldiers would do it. None of the soldiers would have anything to do it. They all stepped back. No one volunteers to execute the criminal. No, they said, we do not know how to do it. It is not a thing we have been taught. So they've been taught to face an enemy face to face, whether it's arm-to-arm combat or whether it's a sortie, whether there's such things. To face danger, face to face, they've been taught, but they don't know how to kill a relatively innocent person who is just standing there. It's not a thing we have been taught. What was to be done? So what is to be done? Again the ministers considered and reconsidered. So again the council is called and again they ponder, discuss, weigh the information, right? They considered and reconsidered. They assembled a commission and a committee and a subcommittee, right? So they formed a commission, a committee and a subcommittee, and at last they decided the best thing would be to alter the death sentence to one of imprisonment for life. So at last they decided, we're going to change the sentence. We can't keep, no one can execute this person, this criminal can't be executed. So they decided to change it to one of imprisonment for life. This would enable the king to show his mercy and it would come cheaper. So, see, if the people learn that the head of state has pardoned a criminal, it's announced, in the kingdom. The king of Monaco has pardoned this criminal who was to be executed, right? So what would the people think? Oh, we have a just and merciful king. He's so kind. We are glad, we are happy to have such a ruler, right? This would enable the king to show his mercy and it would come cheaper. So they think that imprisoning the the criminal would be cheaper. The king agreed to this, and so the matter was arranged. Right? So the king agreed. Okay, let's change the sentence to one of life imprisonment. The only hitch now was that there was no suitable prison for a man sentenced for life. Now, there's another problem. There's no suitable prison for a man sentenced for life. There was a small lockup where people were sometimes kept temporarily. So there was a small lockup, a small cell where people who stole some fruits or something were kept, right? They were kept temporarily, but there was no strong prison fit for permanent use. However, they managed to find a place that would do, and they put the young fellow there and placed a guard over him. The guard had to watch the criminal and had also to fetch his food from the palace kitchen, right? So they found a suitable place. They put the young criminal there, and they placed a guard over him. The guard's duty is to see to it that the criminal does not escape, and the guard had to watch over the criminal, and he had to fetch his food from the palace kitchens. The guard had to fetch the prisoner's food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to the cell, right? So this is the duties of the guard. The prisoner remained there month after month till a year had passed. Prisoner remained there for a whole year. But when a year had passed, the kinglet, looking over the account of his income and expenditure one day, noticed a new item of expenditure, right? So the kinglet is doing balancing the budget, yearly budget, and he noticed a new item of expenditure. What is this? This was for the keep of the criminal. Keep of the criminal means the cost of the food, the cost of the guard's salary, the cost of keeping the criminal in the prison. There was a special guard, and there was also the man's food. It came to more than 600 francs a year. So 600 francs a year. That's around, something like 60,000 rupees a year. And the worst of it was that the fellow was still young and healthy and might live for 50 years. Right? So 50, he might live for another 50 years. Right? Life imprisonment means you are not allowed to go out for life. Right? He might live for another 50 years. 50 years into 60,000. That's around, easily comes up to 30 lakhs or something like that. Right? So when one came to reckon it up, the matter was serious. It would never do. So the king summoned his ministers and said to them, right? You must find some cheaper way of dealing with this rascal. The present plan is too expensive, right? So they have to find a cheaper way of dealing with this rascal, right? The present plan is too expensive. And the ministers met and considered and reconsidered till one of them said, so again the committee is formed, right? The ministers met, they considered and reconsidered, they pondered, weighed, considered all the information. One of them said, gentlemen, in my opinion, we must dismiss the guard. So one of the ministers says, we must make the guard go away and unlock the gate. But, rejoined another, but replied another minister, the fellow will run away. Well, said the first speaker, let him run away and be hanged to him, right? So, okay. Right, so let him run away, let him escape, says the first minister. So they reported the result of their deliberations to the kinglet, and he agreed with them. So they reported the results of their discussions to the king, and the king also agreed with them. The guard was dismissed, and they waited to see what would happen. All that happened was that at dinner time the criminal came out, and not finding his guard, he went to the king's kitchen to fetch his own dinner. He took what was given to him, returned to the prison, shut the door on himself, and stayed inside. So they wait to see. From a distance they watch him, right? They wait to see what the criminal would do. He didn't do anything. The door was unlocked, there was no guard. All he did was, at dinner time, he came out of his cell, went to the palace kitchen, took what was given to him, returned to the cell, and shut the door on himself. Right? Next day, the same thing occurred. So he repeats this the next day. He went for his food at the proper time, but as for running away, he did not show the least sign of it. So, running away, escaping, he did not show any sign of escaping. What was to be done? They considered the matter again. So again the committee was formed. We shall have to tell him straight out, said they, that we do not want to keep him. So finally they decide, we'll tell him openly, we don't want to keep you, please, just vacate, right? They did not want to keep him. So the ministers of justice had him brought before him. Minister of justice had the criminal brought before him. Why do you not run away? Said the minister. There is no guard to keep you. You can go where you like, and the king will not mind. So he asked him openly, right? There's no one to guard you. You can go where you like. You're free. You're scot free. And the king, he has absolutely no second thoughts. He wants to make you leave, right? I dare say the king would not mind, replied the man, but I have nowhere to go. The king may not mind, the criminal replied, but I have nowhere to go. Where will I go? What can I do? You have ruined my character by your sentence, and the people will turn their backs on me, right? So, this news of the criminal's imprisonment, his character has been, it's been blemished, it's been tarnished beyond recovery. And no one will mix with the criminal, right? No one will actually give, refuge to a criminal. So the people will turn their backs on me. No one will even give me a job, right? But besides, I've got out of the way of working. So he says to them, it's been a year, more than a year that I've been, up and down the courts of law, into the prison and all this sort of, it's been more than a year. I have lost the touch of working, right? I've forgotten how to do my job. It's good in something, right? But you see, if you leave something, it's like, rusty. Your sword becomes rusty, not fit, right? But I got out of the way. You treated me badly. It is not fair, says the criminal. In the first place, when once you sentence me to death, ought to have executed me. So, a long time ago, you sentenced me to death. You should have executed me, right? Now, if you had executed me, the matter would not have come up now. It would have been over in less than a second. One moment I'd be alive, the next moment I'd not be there. See, right? When you sentence me to death, you ought to have executed, but you did not do it. That is one thing I did not complain about. I did not complain about you not executing me. Then you sentence me to imprisonment for life and put a guard to bring me my food. Right? You imprisoned me for a whole year. You put a guard to look after me. But after a time, you took him away and I had to fetch my own food. Again, I did not complain. Again, even when you removed the guard, I did not complain. But now you actually want me to go away. I can't agree to that. So he says, I can't agree to it. Right? You may do as you like, but I won't go away. What was to be done? Once more, the council was summoned. What course could they adopt? The man would not go. They reflected and considered. Right? So they weighed all this again. The only way to get rid of him was to offer him a pension. So they reported to the king. There's nothing else for it. We must get rid of him somehow. The sum was fixed at 600 francs, and this was announced to the prisoner. The sum of the pension was fixed at 600 francs. Please leave. We'll give you 6,000 francs, 600 francs. Okay? The pension was fixed. Well, said he, I don't mind so long as you undertake to pay it regularly. On that condition, I'm willing to go. Right? So he agreed to that, and he left the kingdom. So the matter was settled. He received 1/3 of his annuity in advance. Right? 1/3 of his pension he received in advance. And out of 600, he received 200 francs in advance and left the king's dominions. Right? He left the king's kingdom. It's only a quarter of an hour by rail. So to cross the border, only a quarter of an hour by rail, and he emigrated, went to a foreign country, neighboring country, and settled just across the frontier, where he bought a bit of land, started market gardening, and now lives comfortably. Right? He bought a bit of land, started market gardening. Market gardening is a small plot of land, you grow tomatoes, potatoes, peas, turnips, and things like that. You sell that, and you make some money, and now the criminal lives comfortably. He always goes at the proper time to draw his pension. At the proper time, he goes to draw his pension. Having received it, he goes to the gaming table, stakes 2 or 3 francs, sometimes wins, sometimes loses, and then returns home. He lives peaceably and well, right? So, having received the pension, he goes to the gaming tables, stakes 2 or 3 francs. Sometimes, out of the 600 francs he receives a year, he stakes, 2 or 3 francs at the gaming table just for a bit of excitement, just for a bit of change. His life is also a routine, right? So he goes to the, gaming tables, to the casino, bets on something, stakes a very small amount of money. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses, and then he returns home after this bit of excitement. He lives peaceably and well. So finally, he lives peaceably and well. It is a good thing he did not commit his crime in a country where they did not grudge expense to cut a man's head off or to keeping him in prison for life. So if he had committed his crime in a country where they do not grudge expense to, if he had committed his crime of murdering someone in, like in a country like France or Italy, they would not grudge the expense to kill. So those countries, they would easily arrange for a guillotine, they'd easily arrange for an execution, and he would have been executed. Okay? Or if it was the sentence was more lenient, they would not hesitate to keep him in prison for life. So this story was written in 1897 by Leo Tolstoy, and as you can see, the story is based on facts, right? How the government operates, where they get their taxes from, right? And so on and so forth. So it is relevant, and it too, especially the time of the COVID time. In fact, when I took online classes for my students, online classes, I did mention this. When lockdown was lifted and I was doing this story, I did mention this. So that's it. So thank you.